Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is the Institute Saga 2 in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 6, What? What's the problem, Chuck? Xavier looked up from the file he was reading and stared for a moment at the quartet in front of him before speaking. The Avengers are having difficulties on a mission. Fury sent me a request for backup. Juggernaut. Logan snarled, then he blinked as Xavier shook his head. Apparently not. According to Director Fury, the person who they're up against a female with a tail. A female with a tail? Cyclops repeated slowly. Yes. Apparently the Avengers were taking down one of Victor Von Doom's pet projects when the unknown female came out of nowhere and essentially demolished the whole area with the aid of an army of squirrels. For almost a minute, the quartet stood motionless in disbelieving silence, then Clark spoke. Let me see if I understand this. We're going after a girl who's holding her own against the Avengers. And Dr. Doom. Xavier added. Director Fury is keeping track of her location. He asked if you could go in after her. Ooh-kii. Scott said after a moment. I assume we'll be taking the Blackbird. I will uplink the coordinates to it. ETA, 3 minutes. Clark nodded as he rose from his seat. I'll go ahead and scout the area. Logan, you know what to do. Colossus watched Clark walk out of the cockpit, then turned to look at Logan. What he mean? He's deploying through the ventral hatch. Logan shrugged. Not the ramp, the hatch. It's somewhere between an airlock and a bomb bay. Ah, he's in, inner hatch closing. Flyboy, you ready? Ready. Extending baffle now, pressure nominal. Deploy in 3, 2, 1. Logan hit a button and Colossus heard an odd noise from the main compartment. What was? Linear electro drivers. Cyclops explained. If he simply drops out, the turbulence might cause him to hit the Blackbird, and since he's tougher than the plane, by catapulting him out, it gets him clear quickly. There he goes. Colossus craned his neck and caught a glimpse of a red and blur zooming ahead of them. Think he will leave anything for us to do? Hope not. Logan half grumbled. If anything can take down Flyboy, it means that we're screwed. I remember you took down Juggernaut without him. Colossus said slowly. Why was he not there? He was, just as backup. Cyclops explained. At the time, Magneto thought that Quicksilver had managed to get rid of him. We were letting him continue thinking that so that Superman's sudden entrance would shock him. Of course, our plans kind of fell apart when we discovered that Magneto was using kryptonite. That stuff's lethal to Superman, which is why he couldn't help us directly, at least until he threw Juggernaut into the fray. Ah, I had wondered where Juggernaut came from. Colossus nodded. Thank you. For what? Logan shrugged. ETA 1 minute. You bad man. Look, lady. The red and black-clad sword-wielding man gasped as he barely managed to avoid a downwards punch that left a small crater in the ground. It was just a mission, okay? No hard feelings. What the? The girl spun and her furry tail caught her target in the midsection, sending him straight into a nearby wall. Erg, that's gonna hurt in the morning. The man started to pull himself to his feet, then froze as a pair of red boots descended into his field of view. Looking up, he found himself staring at a very familiar person. Oh wow. It's the Great Boy Scout. Oh, can I have your autograph? Why are your Underoos outros? Clark blinked. What? Why where when ho how? The man giggled. I'm Deadpool and I'm in trouble. You gotta watch out for the tough ones, the walking nukes. You know, you, Iron Man, Thor, Squirrel Girl. Squirrel Girl. Superman repeated, feeling somewhat confused. Turning, he froze as the tailed brunette glared at him. Why are you helping the bad man? Tippy-toe, attack. Superman simply stared as a large squirrel raced towards him, chittering fiercely, then he half-ducked and grabbed it mid-leap, holding it at arm's length. So, you're Squirrel Girl, right? Let Tippy-toe go. Squirrel Girl shouted, running towards him, briefly dropping to all fours to move faster. Leaping at him, She smashed through the wall as Superman simply flew sideways to dodge her. "Deadpool, where'd you go?" A groan distracted him and he turned in time to see Squirrel Girl stagger back out through the hole she had made. "You are a bad man, doing that to Tippy Toe." Squirrel avalanche. Clark's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. Squirrel what? A slight rumbling was his only warning before a veritable tidal wave of squeaking fur hit him from behind. "Help! Help! She's after me and we hadn't even spent the night together." "Wade?" Logan asked in near shock. "Wade Wilson. I thought he was Deadpool," Colossus said, staring at the approaching man. "Magneto hired him few times. Spent several hours cursing and vowing never again each time. Wolvie. Metal man whose name I can't remember. Odd guy with strange glasses. Invisible rabbit named Harvey." "Oops, wrong story." Logan started to rub his forehead. "Wade. Harvey?" Scott asked before he could stop himself. "Oh. Deadpool said. Hey, readers, the glasses guy's gone mad. He's talking about invisible rabbits." "What? You were the one talking about an invisible rabbit named Harvey." "Scott. Enough." Logan barked. "Wade's insane. Don't try to understand him. Half of what he says is nonsense. Let me deal with him." "I resemble that remark." Wade pouted. "It's only 7/15 that's insane. Hey, it's Wolvie. I've got something for you." Scott gaped as Deadpool had somehow pulled a huge bazooka out of nowhere while they were distracted and was aiming it at them. Where the hell did he get that from? "Don't ask." Deadpool laughed, "but it involves a lot of lubricant." Scott opened and closed his mouth several times, then half turned to give Wolverine a disbelieving stare. Logan simply shrugged. Boom. Scott leaped backwards as something large and white erupted from the end of the weapon. It flew forwards, then slowed and drifted to the ground before deflating into a puddle of white fabric with bits of black. "I missed. But I never miss with my sheep gun." Scott simply stared at the obviously insane man. Logan was rubbing his forehead with both hands while Colossus face palmed. "Whoa. Thanks for covering for me, guys. I'll remember your heroic sacrifice." Before Scott could force his mind to respond, Deadpool had dropped his gun and run past them. "Logan, did someone drug my coffee this morning?" "Wade's always like that." Logan groaned. "He's a mutant. He was part of the program that tried to turn me into Weapon X. He was dying from cancer, so the docs put some of my DNA into him to get him to heal. It worked, but it drove him mad. Also did something weird to his normal powers. He used to be a low-level precog. Now, he's... Where did the bad man go?" Scott stared at the new arrival, his sense of unreality mounting. "Deadpool? He said something about us covering." "No." Logan shouted, but it was too late and the teenage girl's face creased into a ferocious frown. "Then I'll have to deal with you first." "Whoa!" Deadpool gasped as the sound of ferocious combat rose behind him. "That was close, wasn't it, readers? Now to get, oh, hello again guys. Good to see you're feeling better." "Deadpool." Thor ground out, "You will be handed over to the authorities. Imprisonment shall be yours. The fate of a thief and scoundrel who allies with evil. My God, you are so sexy when you take command." Deadpool purred and everyone stared at him. "I just said that out loud, didn't I?" Thor froze, then slowly stepped backwards, looking rather disconcerted. "Oh, come on, big guy." Deadpool continued, "Flex those muscles for me. Strike a pose." "I don't know whether to be amused or disgusted," Hawkeye said almost meditatively. Oh. Let me answer. Let me answer. Why are you all looking at me like that? Oh, you love me. You really love me. Anyone else getting a headache from this guy?" Captain America asked pleadingly. Me. Deadpool gleefully shouted. "Get off me." Scott pulled himself up onto his hands and knees, keeping his eyes closed as Colossus finally managed to free himself from his attacker. Anyone seen my visor? Left hand. Logan gasped and Scott felt around until he found it. Putting it back on, he waited for the triple beep that told him it was still intact, then he opened his eyes just in time to see Colossus crash to the ground. Damn it! Logan hissed as his lunge missed her. How the hell are you so lucky? I don't need luck. Squirrel Girl stated confidently. I eat nuts. What? Scott asked, trying to wrap his head around the sheer strangeness of that statement. Don't ask. Logan stated just before he was grabbed and hurled into the air. Whoa! What the hell happened to Superman? Scott demanded, backing away from the advancing teen. Squirrels. Came a reply as Superman seemed to materialize behind Squirrel Girl, grabbing her in a half Nelson. Everyone stared at him. Flyboy. Your suit. I know. Clark stated, looking down at the shredded trousers that were all that remained. I thought that fabric was bulletproof. Scott said slowly. And knife-proof. Colossus added. Apparently, it isn't squirrel-proof. Clark sighed. Doom has escaped and I have no idea where his ally went, so all in all the mission is a failure. Hang on. Squirrel Girl said, you mean you aren't villains? Then why were you helping the bad man? We weren't. Logan half shouted. He set things up so that he could escape, using us as a distraction. Oops. Sorry. But what about those others? That big green man tried to hit me. Hulk was aiming for Doom, you just got in the way. A mechanical voice said and everyone looked up to see Iron Man, his suit severely damaged, descending in a barely controlled fashion. As he touched down, he glanced at Superman, then did a double take. Wow, squirrels. Squirrels. Superman deadpanned. Me too. Iron Man admitted, managing to sound embarrassed despite the voice processing. Deadpool managed to get away again. He weirded out Thor, threatened to kiss Steve and since Bruce was still out cold and I was too far away, well, he escaped. For a long moment, everyone stood silent, then Iron Man shrugged. At least we stopped Doom again. What was he doing? Scott asked curiously. He was trying to brainwash squirrels and control them. Squirrel Girl said angrily. No one hurts my cute little friends. Yeah. Not just squirrels, he was trying to brainwash humans, but it was affecting all mammals. Iron Man shrugged. The Fantastic Four were dealing with a multiple Doombot attack on the other side of the country, must have been a diversion. Thankfully, this young lady slowed Doom down enough that we were able to disable the machinery he was using. He was brainwashing humans as well. Squirrel Girl asked in a shocked voice. Oh, that is one evil man. Can you let me go? I'll be good. Superman released her, then looked down at the remnants of his outfit. Cyclops, take charge. I need to get my spare outfit from the Blackbird. Even as Cyclops nodded, Superman zoomed off, one hand preventing his trousers from falling off due to air friction. Squirrel Girl watched him go. What is he? He doesn't smell human. Long story. Cyclops sighed. Come on, everyone. Let's make sure that whatever Doom was using is secured. Iron Man. Which way? That was surreal. Scott stated, running his hands through his hair as he slumped back in his seat. Anyone know what's happening to that, to Squirrel Girl? Reservist status on the Avengers. Logan sighed. But she wanted an option on joining the X-Men. I think Flyboy has a fangirl. Clark simply glared out of the viewport. She call him Beefcake Man. Colossus chuckled. Very funny, watching her try hug you. Clark sighed and rested his head in his hands. After a moment he nodded. What? I've decided. Clark said firmly. I was unsure whether to wait until I could revive all of them or just do them on an as and when basis, but with beings like her around, I'm going to need some Kryptonian backup. When we get back, I'm reviving Kara. After I redesign my outfit and everyone else's to make them squirrel-proof. There was a long silence. I can't believe I just said that. Clark added with a sigh. Chapter 7, revival. The darkness that was engulfing her seemed to ripple and strange noises leaked through. 1. Forge, the lighting rig is. The weakness that had sapped her ability to move was slowly fading. Once again she could feel air flowing over her face, a soft material beneath her and covering her body. Bioenergy fields stabilizing at last, cellular force fields are starting to ease. The sounds seemed to carry meaning, but they were unfamiliar to her. A different language, perhaps. Or had she suffered from an injury to her head? It was possible, but there was no pain. Waves indicating that she is waking. She tried to open her eyes, only for light to lance painfully between her eyelids. Wincing, she tried to lift her arm to shield her vision, but the lingering weakness defeated her intent. Moved. I think she's. She managed to open her eyes slightly and the moving shapes around her came into view. Blinking to try and sharpen her vision, she tried to speak, but only managed to produce a croak. Hashtag here, drink this hashtag a voice said and she felt a liquid dribbling slowly into her mouth. Letting the first few sips simply sink into her mouth, rehydrating it, she gratefully swallowed the rest. The straw was removed and she tried to speak again. Hashtag how long? How many, hashtag. A long silence followed her question, then a hand placed itself on her shoulder. Hashtag it has been over a dozen orbits since you entered stasis, Kara Zor-El. You are the first to be revived hashtag. Kara sagged in relief as the tension left her. There were others. She was not the last. Hashtag who are you, hashtag. Hashtag I am Kall, your cousin hashtag the voice replied gently. Hashtag I was sent to this world as a baby and grew up here before returning to rescue you and the others. Get some sleep, we will talk when you are feeling better hashtag. Carol let the darkness engulf her once more, smiling as she did so. She's stabilizing. Forge said, lifting his transformed hand from the interface and letting it resume its normal human appearance. Those sun lamps are doing good, but I think we should cut back on them for now. We don't want her to wake with her powers at max and with no idea of how to control them. Agreed. Rogue said as she finished adjusting the sheets covering Kara. I've seen what happens when ya go all out, if she panics. Clark nodded. Agreed. Do it, Forge. She'll still wake up strong. Forge noted. I think you should stay here, just in case. Clark nodded and waved his hand. In response to his signal, a chair drifted over and settled to the ground. Rogue just grinned. That never stops amazing ma. Clark nodded as her even as he spoke. Thank you, Fortress. You are welcome. Forge grinned. One day, we'll hopefully be able to create pseudo-sentience like that. May take a while, though, we still need to get a grip on subquantum manipulation. Rogue stared at him blankly, then shrugged and walked out. As she did so, Clark heard her mutter geeks under her breath. Forge gave him a confused look as he tried not to laugh. Whoa, babe alert. Samuel said almost reverently, screeching to a halt and staring at where Clark and Rogue had emerged, alongside a jumpsuit-clad blue-eyed blonde girl that he didn't recognize. The girl was looking round, wide-eyed, trying to take everything in. She's sexy. Roberto half-whispered. Who do you think she is? That's a nice outfit, I wonder if I can talk her out of it. Ray snickered. I'd cut down a bit on the comments. Speak advised as he walked up to stand beside the group of admiring teens. Clark has super hearing, remember? He can hear every word you've said. Heck, he can hear your heartbeats from here. Ray paled. Clark, I didn't mean it. It was a joke. Honest. Clark turned his head slightly and the grass at Ray's feet ignited, only to be put out by Bobby Drake. I think that was a warning to think before speaking. Speak noted, seeing Clark nod his head in confirmation. You may want to leave, Clark'll introduce her to us when he thinks she's ready for it. Before they could take more than a few paces, a ferocious barking sounded and Jamie came running from the undergrowth, Ronnie chasing him in her wolf form. I said I was sorry. Oof. The blonde girl reflexively caught Jamie as he cannoned into her, then stared in confusion as 4 Jamies landed on the ground while the 5th tensed as he realized where his head was. Almost instantly, the other 4 duplicates started apologizing. Ronnie screeched to a halt as Clark stared at her, one eyebrow raised, then reverted to human form, earning a shocked look from the blonde. MMMMFFMMM. MMFHHMFF. MRRMRHHMFFFRHMMRRR. Hashtag Kara, you can let him go now hashtag. Kara blinked, then suddenly realized that she was still holding Jamie with his face buried between her breasts. With a gasp, she released the dazed youth. 2 of his duplicates supported him as the other 2 continued their apologies, only to stop when Clark raised his hand. Ronnie, what did Jamie do? Ronnie glared at the 5 boys, who all swallowed and quickly hid behind Kara and Rogue, much to the 2 girls' amusement. I kind of tripped over and, well, one of the clones said, ducking back behind Kara as Ronnie growled at him. I said I was sorry. It was an accident. Honest. I think you have terrified him enough, Ronnie. Clark said with a wry smile. I can tell that he's telling the truth, it was an accident and he has apologized. And Kara, I'm sorry for doing it to you too. Jamie added, causing Clark's eyebrows to shoot up and Rogue to start giggling. Hashtag what did he say, hashtag. Hashtag he said that he was sorry for ending up with his head in your chest hashtag Rogue explained. Hashtag he was running because he had accidentally done the same thing to Ronnie hashtag. Hashtag I understand and forgive him hashtag Kara said, giving 2 of the clones a reassuring smile. Hashtag hopefully he'll be more careful next time hashtag. Hashtag I think he will be hashtag. Kara forgives you but asks that you watch where you are going next time. Clark explained to the bemused clones, all of whom promptly started to thank her. Can you get back to just one of you? Sure. One of the clones responded as the other 4 faded away, causing Kara to look even more amazed. Thanks for saving me. Ray finally managed to get his wits sorted. Damn, that is one lucky boy getting to put his head in her, arg. Hot hot. Sighing, Bobby froze the smoldering grass again. Ray, think before you speak. Kara accepted the proffered foodstuff and looked at it curiously, then at the woman who her cousin had introduced as his adoptive mother. Seeing the amusement on Clark's face, she took a small nibble, then her eyes widened and she took a larger bite. Hashtag I think that she likes them hashtag Rogue smirked, accepting a cookie of her own. Thanks, Mum. Martha smiled broadly as she handed Clark a glass of milk, then turned to deal with a large saucepan bubbling on the stove. Anytime, dears. Now, you run along and have fun, I've got some cooking to do. Yes, Mum. Clark and Rogue chorused before looking at each other. Clark grinned as Rogue giggled and they led Kara out of the kitchen. Hashtag those cookies were really tasty hashtag Kara said with a smile. Hashtag Aunt Martha is very good at making good food hashtag. Hashtag wait until you have one of Martha's meals hashtag Rogue said, licking her lips. Hashtag everyone here would put their lives on the line to protect Mum and her cooking hashtag. Hashtag I can believe it hashtag Kara smiled. Hashtag so, now that you've introduced everyone, what's next on the list, hashtag. Hashtag powers hashtag Clark said. Hashtag by now, you should have absorbed enough solar energy that your powers are starting to activate. Let's go outside and I can help you learn your new abilities hashtag. Holy. What did you do, Cannonball? Hey, it wasn't me. The duo stared at the new clearing with crushed trees, scorched stumps and shattered rocks littering the ground. Cannonball, Sunspot. A new voice said and the 2 boys half turned to see Jean approaching them. I felt your confusion. What is, The boys exchanged confused looks. I helped Rogue to bring a picnic out here yesterday evening. Jean shrugged. Clark was teaching Kara how to control her powers. Poor girl was having real problems with her heat vision, although she seemed to have almost perfect control over her super strength. The boys' stares intensified, Then Cannonball spoke. She has all of Clark's powers. Super strength, super speed, cryo breath, heat vision, super hearing, telescopic vision, microscopic vision, X-ray vision, enhanced tactile capabilities, breath holding of over 20 minutes, flight, invincibility, eidetic and photographic memory. I think that's almost the whole list. How? Sunspot asked in shock. Same way you power your skills. Jean said with a smile. Solar absorption. Except that as a Kryptonian, Clark and Kara can absorb a great deal more energy. Cannonball looked across the still smoking ground and let out a low whistle. Damn. Kara has to be the strongest girl here. Probably. Jean sighed. I'm helping her to learn English, my powers allow me to sense if she understands something or not. For some reason, the professor can't read their emotions, but I can. Of course, that may be the empathic portion of my powers, he's still a far stronger telepath than I could ever hope to be. Sunspot nodded slowly, then his brow wrinkled in thought. How much solar energy can Kryptonians absorb? Compared to me, I mean. A full charge gives me almost an hour, but it takes more than 3 times that long to reach full charge, so. Jean closed her eyes as she sorted through her memories, sifting through different conversations with the Kents and certain medical tests she had overseen. If I remember correctly, Kryptonians absorb solar radiation, but it acts as a catalyst for them. Their abilities are powered by. I don't know the actual term for it. Dimensional energy, maybe? But they need solar energy to tap into it. But a mere 5 minutes sun can give them over an hour of full power, while they can go without recharging for over a week before starting to weaken. Whoa! Sunspot said, absently stroking one of the metal plagues of his belt. That's amazing. No wonder they don't need solar capacitors. Jean looked at him, then her gaze dropped to his belt and her eyes lit with recognition. And how much power do you have with the capacitors? Out of uniform, I'm good for maybe an hour and a half, with the belt, it's up to 8. Sunspot grinned. In uniform, a full day plus and the capacitors are easy to replace, plus my suit acts to enhance the solar energy I can absorb. Heck, it actually changes ambient electromagnetic energy into solar energy for me. Coolest tech ever. I haven't had any upgrades. Cannonball mock moaned and Sunspot shook his head. They're still working out how your shield works, doofus. He shot back. Besides, aren't you learning how to focus that skill of yours? Get it to the point where you can limit its effect. But it's hard. Cannonball pouted and Jean cocked her head. Focus? Limit? What are you talking about? Wheel. Cannonball said slowly, it's something that Clark suggested after he had me demonstrate my power. Hashtag this is amazing, hashtag Kara yelled as she soared upwards, turning to get a better view of the skies around her, the majestic clouds and the brief glimpses of the ground far below. Hashtag when you told me that you could fly on this world, I didn't believe you, but now, hashtag. Hashtag I know hashtag Clark smiled as he flew almost parallel to her, his years of experience showing in the almost effortless smoothness of his flight. Hashtag I sometimes come up here at night to look at the stars. I used to wonder if there were any more Kryptonians out there, now I know there are at least 8 more, even if they are still asleep hashtag. Kara nodded, then slowed to a halt, looking round. Hashtag thank you for bringing me up here. This is far more fun than those English lessons hashtag. Hashtag you still need to learn it hashtag Clark said mildly. Hashtag you, me, and my mother and sister are currently the only Kryptonian speakers active on Earth hashtag. Hashtag I know hashtag Kara sighed. Hashtag it's hard. English is so insane hashtag. Clark managed not to laugh at her honest exasperation. After a moment, he managed to regain enough control to be able to speak without sounding like he was making fun of her. Hashtag that's because English was the language of rulers and traders who dealt with hundreds of other cultures and dozens of languages. It absorbed many words from other ways of speaking, which is why it makes so little sense when you are learning it, but it is the most widely spoken language on the planet hashtag. Kara blinked several times as she thought the explanation through, then she nodded slowly. Hashtag I see. Then I will do my best to learn it. By the way, one of the students said something I don't understand. What does bow chicka woof woof mean? Hashtag. Clark almost choked. The sound of almost every male in the danger room inhaling sharply and then remaining totally motionless seemed deafening as Kara entered, clad in her new uniform. Jamie looked round in confusion. Why is everyone frozen? Is this another of Kara's powers? Roberto whispered as he stared at Kara, his eyes traveling up from her knee-length red boots to her red miniskirt, held in place by a yellow belt, then up further to the blue long-sleeved top which exposed her honed midriff and the red cape which barely reached down to mid-thigh. Hashtag what do you, what do you think? Kara asked, turning round so that the assembled students could see her outfit. It is KAL. It's a variation of the Kryptonian Defense Force uniform for tropical environments. Clark explained. Kara's hometown was quite cold compared to here, so she thought it was appropriate given the temperature difference. That is so not fair. Kitty sighed. How can we compete with her? Kara looked at her and Rogue took the opportunity to whisper in her ear. Kara's face lit up in understanding and she smiled at Kitty. Thank you. Okay, everyone. Clark said with a grin. Since she's been here for a full week, Kara is going to watch as you all run through a few teamwork exercises and even participate once she understands what's going on. After that, Mom's promised one of her super dinners. The resulting cheer almost caused Kara to clap her hands over her ears. That was brutal. Magma sighed as she stepped under the shower. Ugh, if being an X-Man means having to do that every day, I'll stick to just being a new mutant. I hear you. Boom Boom sighed. I think I prefer having the time to gossip rather than train all the time. Speaking of which, Rogue, I hear that you're now sharing a room. Ronnie asked and Rogue nodded as she started to rinse the lather out of her hair. By unspoken common consent, she had taken the furthest shower to avoid accidentally touching anyone, and Kara was lathering up in the shower beside her. Yes, for several reasons. Let's see. Jubilee interrupted. You're Super Hunk's sister and Kara's his cousin, so that's the family angle. You speak Kryptonian, so you can help Kara learn English. Kitty added. Your power doesn't work on Kryptonians, so it's safe for you to share with her. Contributed Jean. Rogue nodded. Y'all got it right. I am happy with what is the word for cousin, hashtag. Cousin. Rogue supplied. With cousin Anna sharing room. Kara finished. I am learning much. Good to hear. Ronnie said, switching off her shower and grabbing a towel. So, what else is up? Kara stared at the ceiling in confusion and Rogue face-palmed. Hashtag it's an expression. It means is there anything that she should know about hashtag? Kara nodded in belated understanding. Chapter 8, Developing Plans. The screen flickered into life and a familiar voice issued from it. You had an update, Bolivar. Trask leaned back in his chair, a wide grin spreading across his scarred face. Yes, Mr. Creed. Our technology department recently made a breakthrough in duplicating the crystal tech acquired from the alien known as Superman. We have a workable version of crystal tech of our own now. Excellent. Garden Creed gloated, then he frowned slightly. A workable version. It is nowhere near as efficient as the Kryptonian technology. Trask said with a slight shrug. On average, we can get just under half the processing power into a crystal a bit larger than the Kryptonian one, and it generates quite a bit of waste heat. But it works. And what does this mean for the Sentinel project? Creed inquired. Trask pulled up several windows for Creed to look at. As you can see, we have plans for several different types of Sentinel. The basic Sentinel is designed to be a combat/pacification model specifically engineered to take down mutants. Although they can be deployed individually, modeling predicts that efficiency will not be great unless they are teamed with a human to provide on-site decision-making capabilities. Using our Earth-created crystal tech, we intend to create a second model, the Decanus. Decanii will be tasked to oversee and augment groups of sentinels. With their extra processing power, a single Decanus will be able to effectively control 11 sentinels, keeping track of their targets and adjusting priorities according to its analysis of the situation. In addition, their weaponry will be primarily support-based, since the sentinels will be acting as their primary weapons. Here, we have the Centurions, created using the Kryptonian crystals. Although they can perform the same function as an Decanus, a Centurion will also be able to coordinate the activities of up to 11 Decanii while still maintaining control over a dozen sentinels tasked to protect them. This means that should a Decanus come under heavy muti attack, the controlling Centurion will instantly be alerted and can adjust the entire battle plan accordingly. Magnificent! Creed breathed almost reverently. How long before you can get them into production? We are still working out some interface issues with the Centurions, Trask admitted. However, we started final design work on the Decanus yesterday. We should be putting the underframe together by the end of the week. It will take several months, at least, to get a working prototype. There is no need to rush, Graydon said, causing Trask to look at him with one eyebrow raised. I have several other projects that need to be finalized before the Sentinel project can go public, and one of those projects should give the impetus for the Sentinels to be received with acclaim by the sheeple who currently ignore the mutant threat. And the alien threat? Trask added before he could stop himself. Graydon nodded. About your plans to capture some mutants for combat testing against the Sentinels. Already in progress. Trask gloated. We have a dozen of those freaks downstairs now, and since they're all criminals, no one will be looking for them. Excellent. Creed almost purred. Excellent. One minor detail though, we have gained a new recruit who is an expert on humanoid combat machines due to his own experiences. His name is Donald Pierce, although he sometimes goes by White Bishop, and he has several cybernetic enhancements. See what you can do with him. His hatred of mutants means that he will be useful. Of course, sir. Trask said. Magneto strode through the doorway of the abandoned warehouse and looked round impatiently. A moment passed and then he raised a fist, causing metal to scream as a concealed trapdoor in the corner ruptured. I was about to open it for you. A voice complained over a loudspeaker. But, if you are in such a rush, you may as well come on down. Hiding a small smirk, Magneto strode across to the warped and broken metal cover, then stepped into the hole, slowly descending down the long, dark shaft. After almost a minute, Magneto halted in front of an open doorway and then floated forwards, adjusting his course so that he stepped through the door as if he had simply debarked from the lift that should have been there. The waiting figure bowed almost mockingly, and when he straightened again, Magneto met his gaze, Magneto's blue eyes meeting the waiting man's glowing red eyes. Eric, how nice of you to visit. The white-skinned man smirked, then his amusement vanished. And just how did you know where my lab was? I went to great pains to hide it, after all. Not all your acquaintances are immune to telepathic scanning, Sinister. Magneto stated. I've known your location since before my unfortunate encounter that cost me my asteroid. I seriously considered joining them against you. Sinister stated, turning back to his workbench. You realize that your little stunt almost wiped out all of humanity, normals, and mutants alike? Even I am not sure that I would have survived it. A long silence settled and Sinister turned back to his visitor, his smirk returning. You mean you didn't know? You screwed up, Eric. The green rock you used, kryptonite, is complex. The larger the piece, the stranger it acts, and you had most of it. The wave would have removed powers, not imbued them. But if you are not here for a critique of that fiasco of yours, then why have you taken the time to visit little old me? Superman. Sinister's eyebrows raised. Such hatred. Superman. What about him? I need one. Sinister stopped moving. You need one? Eric, I'm not sure that even I could combine that many powers into a mature mutant. Not and have them remain viable for any real length of time. Superman's a clone. My son killed him by imprisoning him in a collapsing subdimension, yet he showed up again a few days after my asteroid was destroyed. Magneto stated, pacing up and down the underground laboratory. I need one like him to counter him. Sinister nodded slowly. I see. A clone, Not what I would have expected from Charles, just when you think you know a man. You know that it will cost you. Magneto sighed. I know. What is your price? Oh, just some money, say $2 million, and a couple of things to add to my collection. Sinister shrugged. DNA of a shapeshifter if you can. You'll have it. Magneto snapped. Perhaps that traitorous bitch will be good for something after all. Sinister whistled. Oh, trouble in paradise? I understand. And secondly, DNA of a power leech. I still haven't managed to add one to my collection. The one in the Savage Lands keeps eluding me. Very irritating, don't you know? I know of one who is working for Charles, and have heard rumors of another living below New York. Magneto mused, mentally noting the subject of the Savage Lands, whatever they were, as something to be pursued at another time. You will have it. And a sample from Superman for me to work from. Sinister finished. Maybe some blood, skin, even a couple of hairs would probably be enough. That will be harder, but I shall have some of my acolytes find a way. Magneto mused. I want a pure clone, Sinister. I'll have my own telepaths searching for loyalty imprints. You really think so little of me? Sinister sighed theatrically. After all that we've gone through together. Magneto glared at him and once again Sinister shrugged. You are getting annoying. If your skills were not so useful. But they are, so I can be. Sinister riposted. You are one of the more amusing people I have met, Lens Hair, and believe me, I have met many. Magneto stalked out, his cloak flaring out behind him and Sinister raised an eyebrow appreciatively. Metal threads in the cloak allowing you to control it, how very dramatic of you, Eric. Perhaps, when my master is revived from his eons-long slumber, you will become one of, well. I suppose I'd better get back to work. A scientist's work is never done, after all. Who? That was fun. Lance grinned at Todd's infectious enthusiasm as they exited the newly installed training room. A rumbling laugh from behind them indicated Fred Duke's agreement. Apparently, that was only part of what the training room is capable of. Mystique said from the control console and Todd nodded enthusiastically. Man, that was so cool. That makes my consoles look way outdated, able to actually be in the games. Woohoo. I liked it. Fred rumbled and Lance nodded his agreement. Mystique, I have a question. Mystique finished shutting down the training room and looked at the teen, one eyebrow arched in query. Why did you decide to stop being Principal Darkholm? It's not like there was any real need for you to hide from Xavier and his lot. But I need to hide from Magneto. Mystique said softly. He knows now that I no longer support him, even if I haven't actually joined Xavier. Magneto does not take kindly to people leaving his service without his permission. He personally killed the last one who did so. Wow. Lance whispered. So not cool. Oh shit. Does that mean that we? No. Mystique said quickly. You never entered the ranks of his acolytes, you never used your powers against him and he has no proof you ever acted against him, only that you did the sensible thing and fled from the asteroid as it was falling apart. If I had to guess, I'd say that he might decide to try to recruit you again at some point. The three teens looked thoughtful, then Todd shook his head. No way am I rejoining that bastard. I'd be better off as one of the X-Men. Now there's an idea. Lance mused and Mystique managed not to laugh at Todd's horrified expression. I'll admit that I have considered joining them, Mystique admitted, but after my experience with Eric, I'm avoiding any group with an agenda. Eric wanted mutant superiority, Xavier wants equality and acceptance, which I think is quite admirable, but for now I just want to find my own path. Before anyone could answer, a bell sounded and Mystique smiled, adjusting her appearance back to her Raven Darkholm form, albeit wearing a skirt rather than trousers. That would be Clark. She smiled, hitting the final control to shut down the training room. Try not to destroy the house while I'm gone, and don't wait up. With a slight swaying of her hips, Mystique walked out of the room, leaving the trio staring after her. Mystique. Superman. What? Todd eventually managed. I can see why. Fred mused. Superman always knows who she is, so she knows she can't hide from him, but he's a really nice guy who isn't swayed by looks. Nice guys finish last. Todd scoffed and Lance shook his head. Todd, wrong saying. Drop the last word. Fred nodded. We talked about this. To the best of our knowledge, Superman has never got angry. Never. What would happen if he did? As the question registered, Todd paled, and then his eyes rolled up and he collapsed on the floor. With a sigh, Fred reached down and picked him up by the back of his armor. I'm hungry. Lance said. Call for pizza. Call for pizza. Agreed Fred. Well, I must admit that when you offered to take me out to your favorite restaurant, I didn't expect this. Mystique said with a smile as the server finished placing the various dishes in front of her and retreated with a bow. Clark smiled at her. The Henshin Rangers often come here since it's their unofficial clubhouse, so the staff are used to having superheroes visit. He explained with a smile. That explains why you're in your blue and red. Mystique giggled. I approve, although I would prefer a shorter cape. You have a great butt that really needs more publicity. Clark choked on his drink and grabbed a tissue, wiping his face before shaking his head at her. Out of interest, who are these Rangers? Henshin Rangers. Part-time superheroes. Clark shrugged. Teens, mostly. I worked alongside them a little while ago after an earthquake hit and I give them a helping hand on occasion. They're a mix of mutants and enhancels. Nice kids, although they tend to leap in first and think about tactics afterwards. 2 of them are at the bar now. Mystique quickly glanced across, then fought hard not to burst out laughing. What are they wearing? Clark gave a slight shrug. They're inspired by manga, so generally skin-tight outfits and heavy boots, gauntlets, and helmets. I supply them with their basic bulletproof outfits in whatever colors they ask for and they tend to add to them. One of them wears armor that turns into a motorbike. Oh my! Mystique whispered. Oh, I have to see that sometime. We can visit their headquarters later. Clark offered with a smile. I have a standing invitation to visit, and another to become leader of their team should I want to. Why don't you? Mystique asked curiously and Superman shrugged slightly. They already have a good leader and I'm enjoying myself in Bayville. Mystique smiled and took a sip of her drink, relishing the tanginess of the fruit. And besides, you're there. Superman added and it was Mystique's turn to choke on her drink. Chapter 9, Potential. Faking left, Jean slipped round the player blocking her and unleashed a shot that sent the ball curving into the net, passing bare millimeters from the frantically reaching hands of the goalkeeper. From the bleachers, a dozen of her friends and fellow academy students applauded her and she could feel their approval of her skill. The whistle that marked confirmation of her goal was simply icing on the cake for her. Great shot, Jean. Thanks, Taryn. Jean replied, accepting the congratulating hug from her teammate and best non-mutant friend. I couldn't have done it without your setup. No problems. Taryn grinned as the 2 of them jogged back to the middle of the pitch. I have to ask, who's the blonde on Beefcake's arm? Jean managed not to laugh as she glanced over at the sight that had attracted Taryn's attention and slowly rousing ire. She's his cousin, Kara Kent. She was orphaned a while back and moved to the institute to be with her family. Taryn relaxed slightly. So he's still on the market. Hey, Jean, you keep talking about the institute, can I visit soon? I hear you have a pool. You just want to see Clark in swimming briefs. Jean said teasingly and Taryn promptly turned red. I'll ask the professor, but it should be fine. Amanda is over almost every day. Taryn glanced across to where the girl in question was helping herself to some of the popcorn held by her boyfriend, then she looked back at Jean. No, she doesn't stay overnight. Jean said, knowing what Taryn was going to ask. Both her parents and the professor have put some very strict limits in place. Taryn nodded as they slowed and turned, getting back into position. The referee placed the ball in the center of the middle circle and 2 members of the other team moved forwards to kick off. Taryn shot Jean a predatory smile and half-crouched, ready to dash forwards as soon as the game restarted. 5-1, we hammered them. Taryn exulted as the echoes of the final whistle were engulfed by the roaring crowd's applause and cheers. Hooah! Jean managed not to laugh as Taryn glanced over again at the bleachers, where Clark was standing, applauding them. Tapping her best friend on the shoulder to get her attention, she nodded towards Clark. So, you really do have a crush on one of my teachers, Taryn blushed furiously and Jean used her glance away to wave Clark over. As Taryn recovered, Clark paused to exchange a couple of words with the referee, then stood by the side of the pitch. Taryn gasped as Jean dragged her over. Jean, no, you have to be, don't do, hi. Hello, Taryn. Clark smiled, causing Taryn to blush even harder. Jean told me about you, I believe she called you her best friend and shopping partner. Jean elbowed Clark in the stomach and he oofed good-naturedly, his grin not decreasing a millimeter. Clark, stop teasing her. Taryn, ignore what he just said. Taryn lowered her hands from her flushed cheeks and glared up at Clark, who simply smiled back at her. Clark's one of the nicest men I've ever met. Jean grinned. In fact, I'd say he was super. Clark shot her a quelling glance, then he frowned as Jean winced and raised one hand to her forehead. Jean, are you feeling all right? Just a slight headache. Jean admitted. It'll pass. Clark looked at her, then waved Scott over. Scott, Jean's got a bit of a headache and will probably need a lift back. I'd do it, but I need to ride herd on the youngsters and they'll be rather overexcited. Gotcha. Scott said, glancing over to where Kara was stealing some of Kit's popcorn while Amanda laughed at Kit's indignant face. By the way, Clark said, causing Taryn's attention to snap back to him, I was wondering if I could ask for your expertise this weekend. Anything. Taryn gasped, then she blushed and hid her face in her hands. I'm afraid it's probably not what you think. Clark smiled. My long-lost cousin Kara recently moved here, but there was a problem with her luggage and as such, she doesn't have much of a wardrobe and I'm not very good with fashion. I was hoping I could impose on the two of you to help my little cousin out. Money is no object. Taryn gaped. What? Money is no object. Clark shrugged. I have a large inheritance. Astronomical. Jean giggled, only to receive another quelling look. So I was hoping I could ask you and Jean to help Kara in the morning, then in the afternoon, I'd be happy to give you a tour of the institute. Taryn nodded, grinning despite her blush. That would be super. Clark stared at her for a moment, then he looked at Jean with a raised eyebrow. What? Scott smirked, then he frowned in concern as Jean touched her forehead again. Come on, let's get you back to the institute. Jean nodded, then winced. Then yes, you can go to school. Xavier's voice drifted into the kitchen. But if your headache returns, I expect you to notify me immediately. With your powers, it may be a sign that your abilities are maturing. I'm fine, honest. Jean replied as she followed Xavier into the kitchen. Clark, you ran the skin on me this morning, tell him I'm good. Clark. He and Kara have gone off to help the Fantastic Four with a problem they were having with their space station. Martha said, motioning to the muted television where two very familiar silver-clad figures were maneuvering a habitation module into place. A stocky suited figure that was obviously Ben Grimm stood by the connection point, ready to guide it into place. After that, Clark said that he'd take a quick flight to New York and meet the group that Ray talked about. From where he was eating a pile of pancakes, Berserker looked up. Oomph. GNSMRLK? WRRSPLN. Don't talk with your mouth full. Martha half scolded and Ray blushed and swallowed. Sorry. He's going to see the Morlocks. What's he planning? He's going to offer them sanctuary. Logan half growled. The Brotherhood have the cottage, but they're pretty much normal looking. Sanctuary was designed to be a place where those who can't blend in can go and live as they wish. Once the hydroponics are fully cranked up, it'll be self-supporting. More than that, in fact, Clark was saying something about trading for foodstuffs for the institute. Ray frowned. Sounds good, I think that they'll like it better than the tunnels, but it may be better if I go as well. Clark'll need someone to introduce him. Xavier nodded slowly. I see your point and I agree. Scott, I'll need you to take a note in saying that Ray has encountered a minor family issue that he needs to deal with and that if there are any questions they can phone me. I'll write it out and sign it after breakfast. Ray, Logan can fly you over in the Blackbird and Clark'll meet you there. Nice. Ray grinned before reapplying himself to his food. And with their incredible victory yesterday, Bayville High girls soccer team has won the state school championship. Edward Kelly said proudly from the podium as he motioned for the team to step up onto the stage. Under the leadership of Jean Grey, who inspired them to a 5-1 victory, scoring 1 goal herself and setting up 3 of the others, they proved that the Bayville girls are the best. Please give them a big hand. Scott rose to his feet as he led the round of applause, then he frowned as Jean winced and touched her forehead. A moment passed before her features smoothed out and she lowered her hand, resuming her smile as Principal Kelly produced a trophy from under the podium and handed it to her before motioning for her to take the stand. Thank you. Jean said, her words sounding clearly through the loudspeakers, and Scott frowned as he saw the slight crease between her eyebrows that indicated that she was not as relaxed as she appeared. Although I am proud to be here holding this trophy, it is not just me who should take the credit. No matter how good a leader someone is, it is the quality of those with them that is important, and no captain could have a higher quality team than the one I was honored to lead. I dedicate this trophy to them, as they are the ones who won it for us. Another roar of applause echoed through the hall as Jean passed the trophy to Taryn and stepped back, raising her hand to stroke her forehead again. Scott glanced round and saw that Amanda and Kurt had also caught the fact that something was wrong. Here. Ray said, kneeling down to lever open the manhole cover. Watch how you go, it's a bit dirty down there. Let's go. Ray dropped into the sewer, managing not to place his hand in the trickle of water flowing along the bottom of the circular tunnel. Straightening up, he turned and face-palmed at the sight before him. Damn it. Wish I could fly like that. I can give you a lift, if you want. Clark offered, and Ray shook his head after glancing again at the 6 inches of air between Clark's feet and the dirty floor. You got your stuff. Clark nodded, turning just enough that the container strapped to his back came into view, and Ray looked round, pushing some electricity into his custom torch for a better view. It's been a while since I was last here, but I think it's this way. He said, striding off. Unless they've moved, that is. As Ray splashed through the tunnel, Clark slowly flew behind him until Ray stopped inside. All right, damn it. Give me a lift and we can get there faster. Clark grinned as he ducked down and wrapped one arm around the teen, lifting him out of the dirty stream. That away. Damn it, I'm fine. Jean snarled. It was just a small headache, that's all. Jean, your powers are based in the mind. Scott said, fighting to remain calm despite her intransigence. A headache is bad news for you like aching eyes are for me. You need to go back to the institute and have Clark or Kara run another scan on you. And miss tonight's party at Duncan's? Sure thing, not. Scott sighed as Jean stormed off. Damn it. He whispered to himself, then she shook himself. Jean. Wait up. Wait. Kurt commanded as he caught Scott's elbow. Main angle has this. Scott frowned for a moment, then spotted Amanda talking in a low voice to the stubborn older girl. After a few moments, Jean sighed and unwillingly nodded. She's good. Scott said admiringly. Jean is possibly the most stubborn person I know. How did Amanda do that? Is it a power we didn't know she had? She's just main angle. Kurt sighed with a smile. If anyone can talk sense into Jean, she can. I hope so. Scott shrugged. Whenever I try to get her to do something like get herself checked out, she goes really defensive. Women. Kurt shrugged with a smile. Never understands them, but loves them always. Thanks. Aminata laughed as she enfolded her surprised boyfriend into a hug. Scott, Jean's agreed to go back to the mansion for a scan, but she's still going to go to Duncan's party this evening. Well, she deserves to have fun. Scott agreed. I'll be going too so that if she needs to leave early, she'll have transportation. Fine. Jean huffed from behind them, causing Scott to jolt in surprise and then face palm. But if you interrupt my time with Duncan. Scott nodded nervously in response to the unstated threat. Berserker. Who is the bright one with you? Ray motioned for Clark to lower him to the ground before replying to the disembodied voice. Caliban, this is Clark, also known as Superman. He's one of my teachers in using my powers. He is here with an offer that Callisto needs to hear. He means no harm, my word on it. He is bright. Brighter than you, brighter than anyone. The voice said, and Ray glanced at Clark again before answering. He is from the stars, a man not from Earth. The voice remained silent for a long moment, then its owner moved into view. Ray nodded to the tall, bald white-skinned skeletal man. Good to see you, Caliban. Berserker. Caliban said, his gaze fixed on Clark. Your friend is bright. Caliban can detect other mutants. Ray said quickly as Clark raised a quizzical eyebrow. Humans as well, but mutants are clearer to him. Caliban, may we talk to Callisto? We have an offer that I think the Morlocks would like. Caliban stared at him for another long minute, then turned and started to walk. Come. This is certainly a very tempting offer. Callisto said, looking round at the other Morlocks before turning her eye back onto Clark. You realize, of course, that if Berserker here hadn't come along, we'd have refused instantly. Ray mentioned that he would be useful in approaching you. Clark admitted. I'm glad that I accepted his offer of help. As are we. Callisto said, her attention turning once again to the images projected on the wall. A new home and a chance to actually live rather than simply survive. It is what I was hoping for when I designed Sanctuary. Clark shrugged. I have access to a plane that can hold all of you here, plus quite a bit of cargo so that you do not need to leave anything behind. In addition, there's a couple of fabricators at Sanctuary programmed with basic clothing designs, cookware, and similar. I do not expect an instant decision, so here's a communicator. Once you have made your decision, you can use this to call either Ray or myself, or Professor Xavier if you want to. Refusing to rush us. Callisto said approvingly. Your spiel just keeps getting better and better. Clark nodded, then looked round. One thing. At Xavier's we have discovered that I seem to be immune to X-gene powers. Do you mind if I ask a few of your friends to test their powers on me, to see if my immunity extends to their abilities too? Callisto raised an eyebrow, then nodded slowly. All right, although I wonder how you'd do against the spider. The what? Ray asked curiously. Chapter 10, Increase. Scott leaned against the counter, sipping his non-alcoholic punch and looked over the roomful of dancing teenagers. In the middle of the floor, Jean and Duncan danced together to the beat of the music with many of the others watching them. Hey, Scott. Scott blinked, then half-turned and smiled. Hey, Paul. Enjoying the party? Yeah. Paul said. Taryn's just gone to do whatever girls do, so I thought I'd grab a drink. The punch is quite good. Scott said. I think they mixed several different juices with the lemonade. Paul took the ladle and filled a beaker, taking a sip. Not bad. Not tempted by the booze. Hell no. Scott laughed. If I lose my glasses. I have a serious optical medical condition. It wouldn't be good for me. Paul nodded, looking round. The girls sure take a while. Who you watching? Jean. Scott sighed. She's been having headaches recently, so I volunteered to be her emergency transport back to the institute if it happens again. Looks like she's having fun, though. Paul nodded again, then took another sip of his drink. So, optical medical condition? What sort? I can't see without my glasses. Scott said, glossing over the fact that it was because he kept his eyes closed so as to not to destroy things by accident. My eyes themselves are red. No whites, no iris, just red. That's why I need these glasses. Wow. Paul breathed. That must suck. Yeah, it kinda does. Scott agreed. Several of us at the institute have problems. Rogue has serious skin contact allergies. She can only touch her brother and her cousin without the allergies acting up. Young Jamie bruises so easily that he's barred from participating in games lessons. The professor himself is in a wheelchair. Damn. Paul half whispered. The rest are fine, though. Scott smiled. And with Aurora, Logan, Pietro, Clark, and Martha around to rein us in should things look like they're getting out of hand, we managed to study quite well. Which is why you're in the top 10. Paul nodded, then he frowned slightly. You know, I've never actually visited this institute. I'll clear it with the professor. Scott smiled. Sunday'll probably be good. We tend to just relax that day. We have a pool. That'll be neat, I'll make sure I bring my trunks. Paul agreed. Can I catch a lift that day? Sure, either me or Clark if he's around. Scott said, then he caught Paul's look and mentally cursed the lack of a pre-planned cover story. Ah, yes. Well, in addition to tutoring us, Clark also does some freelance contracting. Mainly solving hardware problems, he's really good at it. He helped me track down a slight problem with my car last month. One of the chems had worn wrong, we had to replace the crankshaft and we took the opportunity to rebore the cylinders and tweak the timing to get a bit more power without needing more fuel. Nice. Paul grinned. Scott started to respond, then he paused as Jean leaned against Duncan, both hands pressed against her forehead. Damn it, that's not a good sign, but if I go over there, I'll help. A voice came from behind them, startling both boys as Taryn stepped forwards. Duncan will see either of you as a threat to his masculinity, but he'll let me get her for you. As Taryn moved towards the couple, Paul and Scott exchanged glances. Was it just me, Scott asked after a moment, or does Taryn really dislike Duncan? Duncan tried to ask her out on a date recently. Paul said after a moment's consideration. Wait, I thought he was. Yeah, he was. Paul confirmed and Scott scowled. That two-timing son of a. Jean, sit down for a bit and see if it fades. If it doesn't, you're heading to the medbay. If it does, no harm done. Jean sat on the chair that Scott had managed to grab and leaned forwards, fingers massaging her forehead. It's too loud. She whispered and Scott carefully placed his hand on her shoulder, concentrating on projecting as much reassurance and friendship as he could. After a long moment, Jean lowered one of her hands and rested it on his. Thanks, Scott, but I think that we should go. Scott asked and Jean nodded slightly. All right. My car's outside. Jean leaned back in the car seat, one hand still pressed against her forehead as Scott carefully but quickly drove back towards the institute. How bad is it? Scott asked and Jean sighed. I don't know. It's like my shields, they're either there or they're gone, and I can't control which it is. Scott refrained from commenting, but the glance that Jean gave him told him that she had caught his thought anyway. I've contacted the prof and he sent me. Another voice said from just above them. Scott jumped in his seat, reflexively slamming the brake and causing the car to squeal to a halt. Damn it, Kara. He half shouted. More warning next time. Sorry. The blonde Kryptonian apologized as she landed just next to the car and reached out to the passenger door. I'm here to take Jean back, faster this way. Jean nodded as Kara undid her seatbelt and then scooped her up. Okay. Scott sighed. I'll see you back there. Is Clark back yet? Kara shook her head as she started to float upwards. No, he contacted Xavier and said something about searching for someone. I'll get the details later. Scott nodded. See you. Kara nodded, then she turned and accelerated away with Jean curled up in her arms. Scott watched her go, then turned as another car pulled up. His curiosity turned into dismay as Duncan and two of his hangers-on got out and stalked across. Hey, Specs, Duncan sneered. Where's my girl? Back at the institute. Scott said, carefully controlling his anger over Duncan's possessiveness. My friend had a faster vehicle. You got in my way. Duncan snarled. We'd have gone all the way tonight. Not likely. Scott said. Jean once told me that she was going to be a virgin until she got engaged at the least. Duncan smirked and Scott felt his heart sink. Oh hell, what did you? Before he could finish his sentence, his communicator beeped and he pulled it out of his pocket. Scott here. Scott, it's Kitty. A panicked voice half shouted. We need you back here, Jean's out of control. Scott leapt into his car and hit the accelerator, leaving 2 strips of rubber as he accelerated away. A moment later, lights in his mirror alerted him to the fact that he was being followed, so he hit the comm on his dashboard. Scott to the Institute, I'm on my way, but I'm being followed. I think Duncan is trying to claim Jean as his own. Understood. A new voice said. Your pursuit will be dealt with momentarily. Scott carefully slid his car round a corner and smirked as a brief tendril of lightning hit the car behind him, causing its electronics to overload and shut down. Scott, you are clear. Storm sent. Head back now, the situation is complicated. Kitty reflexively phased as a filing cabinet flew towards her while Kurt, who had found himself targeted by a table, reappeared on the other side of the infirmary in a cloud of smoke as the table shattered against the wall. Hashtag I've got her, hashtag Kara shouted, unthinkingly reverting to her native language as unseen psychic forces slammed into her, trying to force her away. However, the psychic forces were insufficient compared to her fully charged Kryptonian strength. We need to drain her power. Xavier commanded as he ducked a flying piece of debris that bounced off the console. Fortress, can you do anything? A slight hum announced the activation of the tractor beams and most of the flying debris suddenly changed course, all flying into a single corner. Thanks, Fortress. Xavier sighed in relief, then his grip on the console suddenly increased as the invisible force projected by Jean tried to hurl him against the wall. Warning. The Fortress voice said calmly. Unable to counter direct effects of current psychic disturbance. What's going on? Rogue yelled as she ducked one of the few pieces of flying debris that the Fortress hadn't locked down. Hashtag Jean's power is going out of control. We need you to drain some of it from her so she can control it, hashtag. Hashtag understood. Kurt, get me there. Kurt vanished and reappeared behind Rogue before vanishing with her, reappearing beside the thrashing teen even as Rogue finished pulling off her glove. Hashtag hold her steady, hashtag she commanded even as she grabbed one of Jean's hands. An instant later, she gasped and all 3 were surrounded by an coruscating aura of light. What's happening? Kitty half shouted and Xavier closed his eyes in concentration. I can feel, they're together on the mental plane, working together, doing something, I'm not certain what. The sphere of light seemed to blink out of existence and Jean collapsed almost bonelessly. Wow, that was weird. Kara said slowly as she shifted Jean in her grasp. How long were we in there? Felt like a couple of days at least. What happened? Xavier asked as he carefully wheeled himself out from behind the console. Rogue slipped her glove back on before answering. It was weird, her power was really out of control, but when I started to pull it from her, suddenly Jean, Kara and myself we just. Jean asked for help and we did so. Kara finished. Rogue helped to calm the power while I gave Jean my strength to hold it while she built new shields. Took several days in there, but obviously not as long out here. Hashtag that's right hashtag. Everyone looked at Jean, who looked back at them in confusion. Hashtag what? Hashtag. Hashtag since when can you speak Kryptonian? Hashtag Rogue asked and Jean blinked. Hashtag what do you mean since when? Oh my. Kara, I can feel your thoughts. Everyone's eyebrows shot up at that, then Xavier broke the silence. Well, it would seem that your powers have evolved slightly, allowing you to understand Kryptonian thoughts. Hey, that would mean that she could teach the other Kryptonians when they are revived, right? Kara asked excitedly and Xavier nodded slowly. Yes, language implantation. It's a skill that I developed quite some time ago. When you are recovered, Jean, I'll be happy to teach it to you. For now, though, I'd recommend getting Jean to her bed. I'm here, what happened? Scott demanded, bursting in through the infirmary door with Storm close behind him. You are a hard man to track down. A voice said and the red and blue-clad figure perched on the side of a building jolted in shock. However, I really think we need to talk. Who's there? Up here. The voice said and the figure looked up, stiffening in shock. Superman. The one and only. Clark replied with a smile as he drifted down to the same level as the person on the wall. Spider-Man, I assume. A nod was his answer and he smiled again. It's an honor to meet you. Yeah, me too. Spider-Man gasped. You're my biggest fan. No, wait. I mean that I'm your biggest fan. I've screwed up already, haven't I? Don't worry. Clark laughed, altering his position so that he was apparently leaning against the wall beside the younger man. Anyway, a friend of mine passed a message that someone was considering pressuring you into joining the Avengers, so I thought that I'd pop by first and offer an alternative. I've been involved in forming and supporting several teams. Like the Henshin Rangers in Japan. Spider-Man asked and Clark nodded. I'm more of a loosely allied benefactor for them, but yes. I occasionally deploy alongside a team known as the X-Men and I have fought alongside the Avengers a time or two. I'm now preparing to train a new team, mainly mutants, and I wondered if you were interested in joining. Spider-Man turned to look over the city and Clark remained silent, letting him think. I'm not a mutant, does that make a difference? Neither am I. Clark replied, earning a surprised look. Nor is my cousin, although my sister is. My mom's a full human, but everyone at the Institute loves her. Would I be expected to move to this Institute? At least for advanced training, yes. Superman replied calmly. Any dependents you have would be welcomed as well, as long as they are willing to help out a bit. My mom is the cook, she loves it there. Spider-Man cocked his head slightly. Okay, it sounds good so far. Are you the leader? No, Professor Xavier is. Charles Xavier. Spider-Man interrupted, his voice filled with awe. The author of On Evolution and Adaptation in Humanity. That's him. Superman confirmed. Oh, I am so in. Spider-Man gushed. Superman and Xavier? No way am I missing. Ah. My aunt. Spider-Man said slowly. She doesn't know that I'm. I see. Superman nodded. Then may I make a suggestion? The door opened and the gray-haired lady stared at the group at the door for a moment. Peter? Who are your friends? This is Professor Charles Xavier of the Xavier Institute. Peter said and the man in the wheelchair nodded with a smile. These are Clark Kent, his mother Martha and their friend Kurt Wagner. Everyone, this is my Aunt May. Good afternoon, Mrs. Parker. Xavier said. My apologies for interrupting you, but I was hoping to recruit Peter for my academy, and he didn't want to leave you living alone. May we enter? Of course. May said, then her eyes widened as Clark lifted Xavier onto the raised porch without any sign of effort. Please, come in. Check the description for the links to the author.